All right, so this is Barcelona, 1908. And this was a really interesting time in the history of cities because trams and subways were just entering cities. Cars were toys for rich people. They were not yet commodities. Now, if you look at this video, you see no crosswalks. You see no traffic lights, stop signs. Streets were for people. And cities like Barcelona were very compact neighborhoods networked together where people lived and played and shopped and created, all within a small area, typically a kilometer. Fast forward 50 years, this is a video shot by the great MIT urban planner Kevin Lynch, view from the road, and as you can see, the cars have completely pushed aside all the people. Streets are now for machines, and zoning, which was just at the time becoming popular all over the world, we're separating functions, mandating low-density development, and we're living with those consequences today. So what we are doing is looking in two directions simultaneously. We're looking to the past, when cities contained real, vibrant communities. And we're also looking to the future and thinking about all the distributed, ultimately autonomous systems that can be deployed, such as energy, food, water, mobility, public policy. And it's a really exciting time to be thinking about cities. Ultimately, what we would like to do is to get rid of all the heavy infrastructure, because this is a 18th, 19th century concept. These heavy road infrastructure networks, electrical grids, and the like, and think about much lighter weight solutions. And this is beginning to happen. This is a video that I shot in Amsterdam some years ago. I put my camera on a garbage can and just let it run. And you can see it's much like Barcelona from 1908. You see the tram going through. There are cars, but the place is fundamentally for people, not for machines. So this is happening. So then you might ask, why cities? Well, cities are where all the action is. It's only 2% of the world's landmass, but 90% of population growth will take place in urban areas. It also, cities account for about 80% of the global CO2 production. And it's also essentially all of the innovation, about 80% of the innovation as measured by patents and venture funding. And I would argue that if one is to effectively address all of the great societal challenges facing us, you have to focus on solutions in the city, whether that's climate change, energy, economy, health, food, water, equity, peace. All of those, I believe, are best solved in the city. So I mentioned this network we put together. We now have collaborators in Europe and Asia and in North America. We're trying to systematically move to the south, where I think there is the greatest need for the work that we're doing. Right now it's a little bit of a hub and spoke organization from MIT, but tomorrow we will get everybody together, share ideas with the goal of creating more of a mesh network so people can work directly with each other. It's an exciting time for us. Today we're talking about a process. We're trying to reinvent the process because I think the process of making cities is completely broken. And the process that we will explore relate to insight, transformation, prediction, deployment, consensus, and governance. Insight, okay? All that means is understanding how things are today, collecting and analyzing data, visualizing it in a way so people can understand. In Andorra, which is one of our collaborators, the tiny little country between Spain and France, we are fortunate enough to have years of mobile phone telecom data, CDR and RNC data. And from this we can get really valuable information about the patterns of behavior of tourists, of residents, where people live and work and gather, the impact of different events on the city. We can use it to predict all kinds of things. We also are very interested in collecting data at a much smaller scale, the scale of an apartment. So these are the tiny little MIT environmental sensors that we can sprinkle around a workspace or a home. This is project we did with IKEA. It's the IKEA Living Lab in Malmö, and the little bouncing ball shows the sequence of sensor activations as someone prepares a meal. So the point is, whether it's at the scale of a city or a neighborhood or a home, we're interested in this fine-grained human behavior to then inform what we do. And what it informs are, ideally, new transformational solutions that will improve on those conditions. So many things one can work on, but I believe that the fundamental systems that we have to focus on in cities is addressing the challenges of urban housing, increasing equity, affordability, the challenges of urban mobility, increasing vibrancy, health, efficiency in the city, and rethinking the process of urban design, making it a much more of an evidence-based, data-driven process that includes more people, a kind of design democratization. So I mentioned each of these very quickly. So housing. All over the world you see articles like this. In this case, Boston, where we are. Will housing prices push young workers out of Boston? So we prototyped a few years ago a solution. The idea was to create a tiny little apartment that could be very affordable, but it's transformable. So it dynamically transforms from sleeping to working to a dining room for 6 people to a living room for 6 people. And this uses architecture robotics. The whole wall unit can transform. This creates a walk-in, handicap-accessible bathroom with access to a washer-dryer. So we had a lot of fun playing with these ideas. That was all using robotics to do lateral transformation. We're also now working on vertical transformation in kitchens and bathrooms. So we're having a lot of fun with that. This is a little space. It's more related to the workplace. We call it the escape pod. The idea that in a workplace, one needs to find refuge as workplaces become much more active, much higher density. So in this case, you can work sitting, standing, you can sit at a comfortable chair, you can change the transparency to have privacy, and you can even take a nap if you want. Now this is a living laboratory where we've instrumented the space so we can, as I mentioned before, collect very fine-grained information about human activity. Urban mobility. This is a video I shot in Beijing a couple of years ago. On a good day, there's only green and yellow on that sign. On a bad day, it's all red. And this is the experience that one has in most of the major cities around the world. So we thought we could do a lot better. Since most trips in the city are one person, short distance, low speed, we thought the world needed something between the shared bikes like you have here in China, like Mobike and Ofo, or the ride share that you have here in China, like Didi. So we created a little 3-wheel autonomous bike-like vehicle. So what does this do? Well, the idea is that it operates something like an Uber system. You call for it, it comes to you wherever you are. The autonomy is used for automated pickup and drop-off. So some dynamic routing algorithm would predict the demand and pre-position. We're using lane detection and LiDAR, basically all the technology that you find in the Google car, except the goal here is to make a really inexpensive vehicle that is a good neighbor to pedestrians and citizens in the city. So what we're now interested in is this vehicle to human interaction. So if you look here, it does a little dance around these 2 women who are standing in the bike lane. So that kind of complex vehicle-human interaction is what we're most interested in now. Urban design. Most of the new cities are, in my opinion, horribly designed. This is where I think we can have the greatest impact. So we are now building tools that bring together the ability to dynamically reconfigure with, in this case, Lego. We like Lego modules because people just know to play. So in this case, these little Lego units are labeled different types of residential, including the micro units. And as you change the density, you can see the roads go from green to red, indicating traffic light traffic and congestion. Of course, then we can toggle on our lightweight autonomous vehicles and then see the impact. Or we can map these Lego bricks to micro housing. So the kind of apartment that I showed could be mapped, in this case, to 12 micro units, and as one moves them, tunes the density, you see the impact on the performance of the city. Number 3 that you'll hear about today is prediction. So it's great to understand the conditions, to have a lot of good ideas about innovative solutions, but you want to then predict their impact with some confidence. This is a study that we did in Boston, and it allowed us to then show what Boston's like today, what it may be if we have a future with private autonomous vehicles, which is a slight improvement, or a future where you have shared autonomous vehicle, which is actually a significant improvement on all of these metrics. Number 4, deployment. So even if you predict the future, the potential impact of these interventions, you want to test things. So these are living lab experiments to evaluate these interventions. This is a living lab experiment we did a few months ago in Taipei, where we took our little 3-wheel vehicle out onto the streets of Taipei in the wild, and we're interested in how, as I mentioned, people interact with these vehicles. And so you see, it's this complex environment with pedestrians and other bikes. In this case, the one is following the other, and it's being platooned. So we will continue this kind of work. Within sometime in the fall. Oh, by the way, look at this here. So this guy, without us knowing his intention, just pulled in front of it and we just sort of played with it. And somehow he intuited that it would slow down and stop if he blocked it. We also did a really fun project related to space travel. So you can turn that audio down, I don't need it. So in long space flights, the astronauts have to strap themselves in. So in this case, this soft silicone creature, sort of, with arms will envelop you. So we did this test in a zero gravity flight, and it was really kind of a fun thing. There was a lot of turbulence, but I think it would have worked really well in actual space flight. Consensus. This is one of the most important things that we're working on. So without bringing together all of the stakeholders to agree on the future of their community, things grind to a halt. Just one example of a project that we worked on. There was a proposal in Boston to build new bus rapid transit systems. It's like an above-ground subway station. You go through a turnstile, enter on grade on buses. Now, the car people hate this because it takes away car lanes. The mass transit people love it because the buses flow more rapidly. There's no right or wrong answer. It depends on the values of the community. And when the community gets together, this is usually what happens in the United States. There's a lot of argument. So we thought we could do better. So we built a prototype where we had a community scale model. People could experiment with different station locations, streetscape model, where they can look at the gold standard or station on the sides, bike lanes versus no bike lanes. And as they explored these alternatives, they get real data. So then, rather than somebody arguing, that person could say, well, if you don't like it, show me a better idea. And we found this to be quite effective. And the last thing I'll mention just quickly is governance. This is our newest project. A lot of our ideas are just emerging right now, but I'll just mention one thing that I'm very interested in. That is, in a compact community like I described, I would like to explore the idea of a local economy with dynamic incentives that encourages pro-social behaviors. So what would that mean? So it might operate in a geo-fenced area, only when you're within that district. You might have incentives. The tokens could be worth more if you live and work in the district, or if you shop locally, or if you use bikes and mass transit rather than cars. The cost of electricity might be lower the less you use. It might have more value if you volunteer locally. I think there's all kinds of really interesting things one could do with this idea. Last September, we launched the first City Science Summit in Andorra, one of the tiniest countries in the world, as I mentioned, and that was very exciting. We're now here in Shanghai, one of the most interesting, complex cities in the world, the other end of the spectrum. Next year, we will have our City Science Summit in Hamburg, Germany, where we will focus like a laser on all these interesting issues related to city design, technology, and new mobility systems. So thank you.